Okay, I think that's recording. And then I want to introduce to you again Miss Haley Mills from Charlotte Band Instrument Service. I'm going to let her do a little bit more introduction of herself, and then we'll let her jump right in. So please help me welcome Miss Willis.
Hello everyone, hopefully you can hear me okay. Tried to make this as much of a presentation atmosphere as possible, but out of the comfort of my living room. My name is Haley Willis. I'm one of the repair technicians at Charlotte Band Instrument Service. I am going on my third year there. I actually have my bachelor's degree in music and my master's degree in business. Wasn't quite sure if I wanted to perform or to teach, so I actually stumbled upon this wonderful industry for repair, and I am on my way to making a career out of that, and I absolutely love it. I'm able to practice on the side and play on the side, as well as teach private lessons. So I feel like I have the best of all the worlds. So, but enough about me. Let's jump right into it. So let's back in the habit, the name of the first slide. So let's be honest, some of us might not have touched our instruments since school was released a couple of months ago, feels like forever ago, but it's time to get back in that habit, time to start practicing again. So clarinets, oboes, saxophones, it's time to grease those tenon corks and those neck corks to make it easier for our instruments to go together easily. If you try to put them together dry, it's very likely that the tenon or the neck cork is going to crack and end up falling off, and we don't want that to happen, so make sure you put some grease on there. Brass, please make sure that you're moving and greasing the slides and moving and oiling the valves or the rotors. Make sure that you're moving those and oiling them and greasing them, but we'll get into more of that later. Reed players, single and double. Please make sure that you're soaking your reed in room temperature water. I know some single players, I know you guys like to sometimes suck on the reeds. Do them in water first, just to hydrate them that way, and then you can suck on them from there, but you really want to be careful. Double reed players too. You really don't want to suck on the reed for too long, because our saliva has digestive enzymes within the saliva that's actually going to break down the cane a lot faster. You're going to go through a lot more reeds. Trust me, as an oboe player, I've gone through a lot of reeds. So keep them in water, and helps them last a lot longer. Oboe, for you guys, I went ahead and gave them a diagram. You don't want to soak the cork. Thread, fine. Reed, fine. Don't soak the cork in there, though. All right, moving on. So mouthpieces. You really don't want to leave the mouthpiece in the instrument when you're not playing. Even if you're taking a 30-minute, 15-minute, hour-long break, whatever it may have you, you don't want to leave the mouthpiece in there or the reed on the mouthpiece. So that very first picture there of the trumpet mouthpiece is what happens if you just leave that mouthpiece in there and get stuck. We have to use special tools to get that out. And then on the other side, you'll see that's what happens with a reed. Either if you don't remove it after playing, or if you just leave it on there and it gets chipped, it gets bumped, it gets really, really gross. So you don't want to breathe in any of that. If you have cleaning spray, so we like to use this spray, which is also pictured on the slide. If you've got cleaning spray, go ahead and just spray your mouthpiece, brass or woodwind. Go ahead and spray your mouthpiece and wipe that off. Again, the plastic mouthpieces, so not the reed itself. Every now and then, we like to say once a month, go ahead and brush your mouthpieces out. So you can find mouthpiece brushes of all sizes for all the different instruments, but make sure you're brushing your mouthpiece out. If you don't have the cleaning spray, you can use soap and water, just a mild soap. Again, it's a whole science experiment that I don't think any of you want to breathe in. I have asthma, and I really don't want to breathe that in. So reeds, here's what you can do for the actual wooden part of the reeds. You can actually use hydrogen peroxide or a clear mouthwash, just in a small cup, a reed cup or a small glass, and you can leave it in there for about 30 seconds, helps kill off some of those digestive enzymes, helps kill off some of that bacteria, and then you can, once you're done with the 30 seconds cleaning, you can do the same thing with water, kind of rinse that off a little bit, and you should be good to go with that. I like to use Tom's mouthwash, and there's a picture of their logo there. It's a clear mouthwash, but it gives a nice little minty flavor, whereas hydrogen peroxide doesn't, unfortunately. But yes, mouthpieces, don't leave them in the instruments. All right. Moving on, so we've got our swabs, super, super important. I know it might be tedious and it might take a little extra time, but trust me, this is one of the best things you can do for your instrument every time you play, whether it's an entire band class worth of music or just a simple scale, one note. If any condensation forms on the inside of that instrument, you'll want to swab it out. This is mainly for woodwind players. Brass instruments a little bit more tough, can withstand a little bit more, but woodwinds, you really want to swab that out. Make sure you have the right size swab. So we really don't want to try to take a swab like a saxophone swab here that's got a brush to help swab out the larger bell. We don't want to try to slam that through a clarinet. It's not going to fit. It's going to get stuck. So we recommend, for material, we recommend silk or cotton. This is one of those felt kind of materials. These are okay, but they don't do as well as silk or cotton. When it comes to brushing out an instrument, brushing out a brass instrument, trumpets, make sure you have a trumpet snake brush. Trombone, make sure you have a trombone snake brush. I'm sure you guys can see where I'm getting at with that. You don't want to use a snake brush made for a different instrument on an instrument it's not made for. Don't force a swab or a brush through the instrument if it's starting to get stuck, starting to get tough. If you can't easily move it in and out, don't try to force it. Bring it in, we'll try to get that out for you. Always go bell side first. So the proper way to swab is always bell side first. So for saxophones, you take the weighted metal side, you put it in the bell, you kind of flip it over, you run it through the body, and then you pull it out the other side. So yours can actually go all the way through, and that's for saxophone. For clarinet, you can also go all the way through. So we'll get more into tenon corks, but there's no tenon corks on this clarinet. But you can take your swab, go in the bell side, you can pull it all the way through. You can do this with the instrument all together. You can take it all apart. Doesn't matter as long as you're swabbing. Flutes, make sure you've got your cleaning rod. That you can put a silk or a cotton handkerchief in the rod, and then you can swab it through. Give a twist. You don't want to just pull it in and pull it out. You want to give a good twist to not let your instrument kind of show up like the pictures here, which is really gross on the inside. If you can get a really good twist, you can get it nice and clean. Oboes, this is super important. So any of my double reed players, really quick. Also, you want to go in the bell side. Make sure you go in the bell side. You do not want to bring your swab all the way through. So once it gets to about here, so I've got extra swab on this end. Once it gets to the point where I have to start pulling, you want to stop, leave that end, give a little twist around the bell, and then pull it out the other end. You don't want to bring your swab all the way through. So clarinets, saxophones, take your swab all the way through. Oboes, do not do that. Alrighty, so that swabbing your instrument is super important for you woodwind guys. Baths, you can give baths to brass instruments only, specifically valve brass instruments. If it's got a rotor on it, unfortunately, it's not easy to clean. You just need to bring it in. So French horns, if you have a trigger on your trombone, the trigger portion cannot go in the bath. But for valve instruments and trombones, the slide can go. If you like this trombone over here, there's no trigger, so I can take it apart, put both parts in the bath. But if you've got a trigger and the bell section cannot go in the bath. The hand slide can. Trumpets, as long as you take everything apart, take the valves out, you can dump the body in the bath. There are YouTube videos that help walk you through the process, but I'm not going to go through a lot of the process here. Let's see, use a mild dish soap. So nothing super abrasive, no bleach, no gritty soaps, just mild dish soap. And then as you're brushing through those different parts, don't take the snake all the way through. You don't want to brush it all the way, you don't want to pull the snake all the way through. I know it's tempting because it looks like it's supposed to do that, but really you just want to put in one way of one side of the slide, pull it out, go in the other side. So each section of each slide is its own separate entity. So don't brush this brush all the way through. It'll get stuck and could potentially break off and cause a lot of issues. So don't let your instruments become like these ones and get gross. Don't let that happen. All right, so moving on to stuck and sticky valves and rotors. So once you have given your instrument a bath, brass only, once you've given your instrument a bath, make sure you re-grease and re-oil. If it's not time for a bath, just make sure that they are staying oiled and greased. As soon as the valves or the rotors start to feel sticky or start to drag, go ahead and oil them. We don't like petroleum-based oils, so say no to those. No to blue juice, no to Alcas. But do say yes to synthetic oils. They last a lot longer. Petroleum-based oils are water-soluble, so if you're playing your instrument, those petroleum-based oils are just kind of washing away. You have to put more on and they wash away. Synthetics last a lot longer. So make sure you're using the right oil for your instrument. I've got some options there on the slide. Make sure that the valves are going and the valves are going in the right slots, on the right valve casings. So if you take them out, make sure the 1 goes in 1, and 2 goes in 2, and 3 goes in 3. So stuck slides, specifically, make sure that you're moving them bi-weekly. So I know it's really tempting to leave the main tuning slide where it is because it might be perfectly in tune that day. But unfortunately, it's going to get stuck if you leave it there for too long. So make sure that you're moving all of your slides, trombones you especially, but all the slides, make sure you're moving and greasing them at least bi-weekly. Don't try to attempt to move any valve or slide by force, especially no screwdrivers, no pliers, pencils, drumsticks, power tools. Don't let anyone come at your instrument with a hammer saying, I can fix that. No, bring it to us. We have all the tools that can fix that. Don't let anybody near your instrument with any kind of power tools, especially. The picture that you can see there at the bottom, that is a trumpet, the second valve casing, and you can see right next to that picture the second valve itself that came out of that trumpet. It was stuck. And unfortunately, someone tried to use a screwdriver to take that out and pry that out. It did not work. It ended up not only damaging the valve, but damaging the threads. So the bottom cap could no longer be put on. So no power tools. So there is a trick for you French horn players out there to oiling the bearings. They do need to be oiled in addition to the rotors. So what I'm going to do here, hopefully you can see this. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the cap off of one of your rotors. There we go. And so you'll notice in the slide there is a bearing and linkage oil as well as a rotor. The bearing and linkage is the one I'm talking about now. Notice it's got a needle with a little green tip on it. That green tip comes off and then that's where the oil comes out at the top of that needle. That is super important. You don't want to get a bearing or linkage or a rotor oil that just has the smooth cap like the others do. You need yours to have the needle. So what you'll do is you'll put a little bit of oil right where the rotor cap and the bearings meet. You'll put a little bit of oil right there, and then, hopefully you can still see this, then what you're going to do is you're going to very slowly pull the respective slide out, very slowly. And what that's going to do is there's a suction happening throughout this entire horn, and that suction, as you pull that out, is actually helping to draw in that oil that you just put on there. So it doesn't just sit there. So you want to pull this out very slowly, and then you can take it out, and then you can actually oil your rotors. Again, with that little needle, you can drop some oil down in those slots, and then you can move the rotor around, and there you go. You've got both parts oiled. So that's the trick for French horns on how to oil your bearings and the rotors. All right. I think that's it for that slide. What do you know? All right, so moving on to woodwind keys. Still with the same regard of oiling. So woodwind keys, especially if you haven't touched the instrument in a while, you're going to want to make sure that you oil the keys. You can see the yellow and gray diagram. Right where the post and the key meet, that's where you want to oil. But just the tiniest amount, itty bitty. Too much actually can overflow and get onto the pads and makes the pads no good. So just the tiniest amount right on that spot. Maybe every 2 months. If you're playing regularly, you don't have to oil them all the time. Definitely not every time. You really don't want your instruments to get wet. So no baths for the woodwind people. No baths. Saxophone, not flute, definitely not oboe, not clarinet. No baths for you guys. The screws that hold your keys together are not stainless steel, therefore they will rust. Bad time. Very bad time. Don't try to remove any stuck or rusted screws especially. Don't try to take those out. It just causes a lot of headache. That bottom picture, right at the bottom of the slide, is a rusted screw, and that same screw finally cleaned off. So like they can rust really bad if you get them wet. Adjustment screws, small segment on the adjustment screws. If you've got a screw on your instrument that isn't really holding a key together, that's usually an adjustment screw. You don't want to mess with those. I know it's tempting to try to adjust your own instrument, but don't. Especially coming from an oboe player, we have like 1,000 adjustment screws on our instruments. Don't mess with them. We will do that when you bring your instrument in. Once a year at least, we recommend to get it serviced and adjusted. We'll check those adjustment screws for you. Percussionist, don't worry, we didn't forget about you. Along the line of oiling and greasing, whenever you go to change a head, and we'll go into more detail as to when the proper time to change a head is, but whenever you go to change a head, the tension rods, you should put some lithium grease or Vaseline if you can't get your hand on lithium grease. You want to put lithium grease on those tension rods whenever you're changing the heads, but only a little bit. You don't need to do a lot. And once it's on there, it should stay on there for a couple of head changes. So you shouldn't need to reapply every single time. Only apply if the rod is dry or if that grease has turned brown and dirty. You don't want that. Let's move on. So now we're moving on to body damage. Yeah, oh boy. All right, so specifically talking to our wooden clarinets and our wooden oboes, you really need to make sure that you oil the inside of your instrument, maybe every 3 to 6 months, not super often, but especially if it feels dry, you're going to want to use there are special oiling swabs that you can get to oil the inside or the bore of the instrument. That's the inside of the instrument in there. Again, this is only for wooden oboes and clarinets. But you'll want to use bore oil on that to prevent it from cracking. General body damage as well. Make sure you're loosening neck and tenon screws. So tenon screws for some bass clarinet models and all saxophones. You have those neck screws. You want to make sure that when you are trying to put it in, put the neck in or take the neck out, make sure that you're loosening and tightening that screw respectively. You don't want to crank it all the way down and then try to get the neck out while it's still tightened. Make sure you're loosening that because not only can you do damage to the screw itself or the neck receiver, you can do damage to the neck itself, try to get that out, and tons of damage can come from that. So make sure you're loosening those neck screws. Okay, avoid taking a wooden instrument outside. Percussion, this means you too. Try not to take rosewood marimbas outside. Only plastic really should be taken outside. If you absolutely cannot avoid taking an instrument outside, a wooden instrument outside, try not to place them on any wet surfaces. So not on the grass where there's fresh morning dew, not there, not wet benches, no wet surfaces. That water seeps into the wood, and as the instrument temperature rises and cools, that water is expanding and can cause that wood to crack, which is those series of pictures that you see right there on the right-hand side. Once the instrument cracks, it's not done for, it can be fixed, but we have to go through a process called pinning the instrument. And it helps to pull that crack together and help seal that crack so that the instrument will play again. Yeah, also don't leave wooden instruments in cars. Don't leave instruments in cars, period. They get lonely, don't do that. But especially wooden instruments, especially us being in the South, it gets humid one day and dry another, hot one day and cold another. Don't leave those in the car. You don't want them to turn out like this guy here. Unfortunately, that bottom clarinet is not fixable. So don't be like that unfortunate soul there. All right, next slide, dents and bends. All right, so number one way you can make sure that this doesn't happen is making sure you put it in the case the correct way. So as you can see here, I've got a flute case. The last thing you want to do is try to close it when it's obviously not in the case. As soon as you try to close it, it's going to fall and cause some damage. So you want to make sure that you're putting it in the case correctly. So all the way in the respective slots. And along with the case, as soon as you've got it in the case correctly and you close it, make sure you latch it, make sure you zip it. The last thing you want to have happen is you close it, walk away for a second, come back, forget you have it closed, you go to pick it up and whoa, that's just asking for damage. It's asking for a dented key. dented body, chipped reed, which reed shouldn't stay on the instrument if you're not playing them, just by the way. So make sure that you close the instrument case all the way. Trumpets, marching mellophones, marching baritones, anything with the exposed second valve slide here. You want to make sure that second valve slide is facing up whenever you put the instrument down. So you never want to place the instrument's second valve slide down. Not only can that dent the second valve slide, like you see in the picture right there, but it also can go even further and it can dent the valve casing. So you go from just having a dented second valve slide to no longer working second valve, which this one itself has got some issues. So that could be one of the reasons it could not be working. So make sure your second valve slide stays up whenever you put your instrument down. If anything is stuck, so say that your second valve slide, you have put it down by accident or it got bumped and it's dented the second valve casing, that second valve's going to get stuck. Don't try to remove that by force. Bring that in, we can help you out. Don't try to move it by force or use any kind of tools, screwdrivers, pliers. Don't try to take it out by force. Flutes, saxophones, this is for you, and brass as well, but mainly for woodwinds. If your body gets bent somehow, which it's happened, so say it bends somewhere right in the middle, don't try to bend it back. Don't try to bend it back straight, because as you grip those keys, you're going to do a lot more damage, as well as cause damage to where that bend is. So once a bend happens, there's a lot that it can do damage to. Same with saxophones. The body could bend on this side, or it can bend on the bell side. Don't try to bend it back in any way. All right, let's move on. So now we've got unsoldered and broken braces. These things happen. If you're rough on them, they can happen, even if it's just an old instrument. These things happen. If a brace does break or comes unsoldered, don't try to resolder it. No matter how good the welding skills of you or a family member are, don't try to resolder it yourself. No super glue. Super glue is not our friend in any regard. Do not super glue any part of the instrument together. Zip ties are good as a temporary fix, but as soon as that brace breaks or as soon as that brace comes unsoldered or any part of the instrument becomes unsoldered or broken, you might be able, depending on where it is, you might be able to use a zip tie to temporarily fix it until you can bring it into the shop. No rubber bands. I know they're easy to use, but the rubber actually will, there's a chemical reaction that will happen between the lacquer and the brass, and will be no good. It will cause corrosion, and it's not a good time. Not a good time. All right, so moving on to tenon corks. All right, so tenon corks sometimes will get old. The corks themselves, the adhesive might be old and the tenon cork just falls off. If that happens, try to bring it into the shop as soon as possible, but if you can't get it in just yet, you can use waxed dental floss or Teflon or plumber's tape, as it's also known. And what those things do is the wax or the Teflon tape itself can, it kind of sticks to itself, so it kind of acts, it can be a little sticky and it can help the instrument stay together. But like I said, this is a temporary fix. You're going to have to just reapply and reapply. But once you've got it on to where you think your instrument's going to stay together until you can bring it into the shop, you can leave that part of the instrument together for maybe about 15, 20, 30 minutes max, just to help it kind of form so that you can take it apart easily. Again, if you somehow get it on and can't get it off, try not to use too much excessive force, because you can bend the keys on the rest of the instrument. But yeah, dental floss and plumber's tape can also be used as a temporary fix. No super glue, please. Super glue makes repair technicians cry. Please don't make us cry. We're sensitive. Don't do that. Also, no electrical tape, no duct tape, Gorilla tape. Those actually have an adhesive on them. So not only when you put those on will it get onto the instrument, but as it gets hot, or you leave it outside or in the car, heaven forbid, that adhesive can actually melt and cover on the rest of the instrument on keys, heaven forbid. So no tapes other than Teflon tape, because there's no adhesive on it. Wax dental floss is okay. Super glue, no good. Do not use super glue. All right, moving on to torn or missing pads. So there's several ways that this can happen. Puncture to the skin or a slice in the skin. Um, One of the really common ways is loose items in the case. So try to keep stuff in the case that you know you absolutely need. If you've got an outer case or there's a pocket on the outside of the case, feel free to keep whatever you need in there. But try to avoid, we want you to have pencils. Please have pencils. Have pencils everywhere so you can mark your music and mark what you need to. But if you have mechanical pencils and say the lead comes out somehow, it is very easy in your case for that lead to just puncture right through one of the pad skins. They're very, very thin. So if you absolutely need to keep stuff in your case and you have nothing on the outside as a pocket, Ziploc bag, pop that in the case. But keep it all in a Ziploc bag so it can all stay contained. Weather exposure, adhesive failure, age, those are all just things that happen. Again, don't take a wooden instrument outside and avoid having any instrument in the rain. That's not good. Saxophones, this is for you. One thing, as you can see there with the saxophone pad rot is a thing for you guys. So as your G sharp, E flat, and low C sharp keys stay closed after you practice, all that condensation kind of almost steals that leather onto the tone hole. And that's why you kind of get sticky keys every now and then. It's because any of those keys that stay closed and you've just practiced, that moisture on the inside kind of just almost glues it to the instrument. So we really like the product Key Leaves. So those work by going underneath the bars near some of these keys and help keep those keys open after you practice so they can air out and you aren't left with pad rot. Here's the next thing, and this is actually, we see this a lot, unfortunately, but pad bugs. Pad bugs are a real thing. They're little bugs that like to eat the felts in the pads. So especially flutes, especially clarinets, oboes. If you've got felt in your instrument anywhere, there's a possibility that pad bugs can attack. So especially if you keep your instrument stored in areas like closets, garages, under beds, attics, any cool, dark area, you don't want to keep your instrument stored at all. You want to be out and practicing, right? So don't store your instrument, especially for long periods of time, because pad bugs will flock to that instrument. And once there's one pad bug, there's a high possibility there's more. So as soon as you see any hint of those pictures that you see down there, as soon as you see a hint of pad bug damage, please bring that in, because we want to be able to help you catch that early. If you direct your attention to the kind of middle picture, a little closer to the left, there's a clarinet tone hole that looks like it's got patches kind of taken out of it. If the pad bugs get hungry enough and you do nothing about it, they'll actually start eating through the plastic. That's a plastic horn that those pad bugs have started to chomp away at. So definitely get those instruments as soon as you can, the moment you see any bug damage. Sorry, a little gross, but don't worry, we're going to move on. Percussion, hope you didn't fall asleep. We didn't forget about you. But really quick for percussionists, your snare head usually is an average size of about 14 inches. So if you're shopping for snare heads, that's kind of a base, but definitely measure your snare drum to see what the actual size is. So the top head, you might already know this, but the top head is called the batter head. It's the side that you play on. Really only the those heads nearly worn or punctured through, just like that picture right there at the top. The bottom head, the resonant head, very thin, very, very tight. So be very careful putting that on any kind of surface that might be sharp or have rigid, might have a rigid surface, or even on the stand that it's supposed to be on. Be very careful that there's no part of that stand that can puncture through that resonant head. Those really don't need to be changed very often. Again, you're not playing on that side, but if there's a puncture larger than a quarter, go ahead and invest time and money in changing that head. But if the puncture is small, you can tape that entire hole. Make sure you tape the small area around it as well so that it can't spread. That's a good fix there. Whenever you're changing the heads, like we were talking about, make sure you use lithium grease or Vaseline if you can't get your hands on lithium grease. Always finger tighten the tension rods. Make sure they're all finger tight, so the moment you need to start adding a little bit of pressure, go ahead and stop. Make sure you have the rest of them finger tight, and then once you get to that point, once they're all finger tight, lightly finger tight, then you can switch to your drum key. And that's when you would continue with the star pattern. to further tune and tighten your snare head. Don't use power tools. Please don't use power tools. Always finger tighten and drum key. All right, next slide for you percussionists. Now we're moving on to sticks and mallets. If you're breaking a drumstick, you're doing something wrong. Rim clicks might be a little too intense. Might be throwing them around a little too much. So be careful with the drumsticks themselves. But in terms of mallets, avoid putting the actual felt or yarn mallets, marimba mallets, timpani mallets on anything that's really rough. You even need to be careful about the Velcro on your own stick bag. Make sure that they're not accidentally rubbing against that Velcro and ruining that head. You have to get a new mallet a lot sooner. If you weren't able to save the plastic bags that the mallets usually come in, a good alternative is the plastic produce bags that you can get from the grocery store, and they're free. If a mallet breaks near the head, so it's a little hard to see, but if a mallet breaks near the head, you can, as a temporary fix, use wood glue and stick tape. But when I say from the head, you maybe right about there. From here to the head, you can use as a temporary fix wood glue and tape. Unfortunately, if it breaks like this, it's pretty much unfixable, unfortunately. You can try your best to use wood glue and stick tape, but like I said, the moment that happens, you gotta order yourself some new mallets. So, let's see what our next part is. And once you've practiced on your normal practice pad, you can actually move to a pillow, a regular bed pillow, and you can use that as an advanced chop buster. So especially for double stroke rolls and for mallet lateral rolls, really good for getting better technique because there's no rebound. All right, so the big takeaways I want you guys to take away from today are slide valve and rotor movement and lubrication. Make sure that you're oiling and greasing your slides, your valves, your rotors. Please bring in your instrument, brass and wood with you. Please make sure you're bringing in your instrument at least once a year. Let us take a quick look at it and make sure that nothing needs to happen. We'll put it back in adjustment for you, all that kind of stuff, at least once a year. And brass, we'll see if you need the chem cleaning, but if you take good care of your instrument, you might not have to do the chem cleaning every year. Please swab your instrument. Please make sure you're swabbing, get that condensation out. Remove the reeds from the mouthpieces when you're not playing. If they stay on there for too long, it's asking for mildew and mold. You don't want to breathe that in. Double reeds, make sure you're blowing out the other end so you can get all the moisture out. Please don't eat or drink before you play. My rule of thumb is 30 minutes. And even then, the moment I've taken my last bite of food and I practice in the next 30 minutes, I am swishing out my mouth with water vigorously. You don't want any food or sugar or anything being blown in your instrument. General preventative maintenance, make sure your case is in good condition. So you want to make sure that the latches work, make sure that the back hinges work, so that the top of the case or bottom of the case isn't just going to fall off. Make sure the case handles are in good condition. I'd invest in an instrument stand. They can be a little pricey, but you can see my oboe over here is on a stand being held upward, and then I've got a trombone stand over here. They make stands for all instruments. And then definitely invest in reed cases, whether it's the simple plastic ones that come in the reed cases for single reeds, or if it's one kind of like mine where it opens up, it locks, and it's got little springs so that I can access all of my reeds and they don't move around. Alrighty. I won't go through this next slide too much. They're just product preventative maintenance, and then different materials that we deem safe for temporary fixes. Again, these are all temporary. Percussion, you guys are the only ones that can use tape and wood glue. No one else needs to use tape or glue on their instrument. But you've got a list of one-time purchases, maybe a second one later on, and then the ones that you need to keep regularly stocked: your oils, your greases, your reeds, mouthpiece spray, your clear mouthwash, your hydrogen peroxide for your reeds. And yeah, if you have questions, hopefully you've typed any of them as we've gone along, as you've thought of questions. But if you have any questions, now's a great time. Please type them. And if we can't get them to them today, we'll definitely try to get to them later and get you a response as quickly as possible. But thank you guys so much for having me. I know this is a little bit little bit out of the norm, having it from my living room. But it's been an absolute pleasure to go over all of this with you. Again, this entire presentation is brought to you by Charlotte Band Instrument Service. My name is Haley. I'm one of the repair technicians there. Our owner and master technician is Mr. Thomas Boyd. All of our contact information is on that slide. You can even follow us and like us on Facebook and Instagram. And yeah, if you have any questions that you want to call the shop today, we have some people there right now. You can call right after class and get any questions answered. Thank you so much for having me, and keep practicing, keep playing music.
All right, guys. Anybody have questions for Miss Willis while we're here? Are you all still awake?
Yes.
Yep.
No, ma'am, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
So we talked about last class, how many of, especially woodwind students, have had your instruments regulated, and she talks about that, like she recommends that at least once a year. If you don't know what regulation means, it's where they go through and they check to make sure all the keys are sealed properly. They'll run a light down through the instrument and close the keys to make sure that it's sealed correctly. Lubricate all the keys to make sure the action is correct there. And then on the brass side, just the chem clean. I mean, it's impossible. So you can swab some of that stuff out with warm soap and water, or warm water and soap, and but it's impossible to get all the stuff out without doing the chemical cleaning. So basically, dump your instrument in a bath, and it has a chemical reaction and cleans all that stuff out. They rinse it out, clean it out. If you're not doing that every year, as a general rule of thumb, the instrument is going to start working against you. You know, and I'm a trumpet player. Brass players, you know, we play into that instrument, and then we don't ever get it chem cleaned, and all of a sudden you start to take a breath through the instrument, and you're breathing in last month's lunch. Like that's no joke, right? I mean, so what goes in stays in until you clean it out. So if you have started playing, you know, in 6th grade and you've never had it cleaned out professionally with a chem clean or a regulation or something like that, now is the time. It's definitely the time to take care of that. It'll actually start working against you. You cannot play with a great sound if your horn is gunked up. If you spend thousands of dollars on a professional or a step-up instrument so that you have that bigger bore that's more free-blowing, sounds nice and open, but yet it's clogged up, you know, it's like a heart with clogged arteries. It's going to give you troubles, all right? So if you haven't done that type of cleaning, either on a woodwind or a brass instrument, you really need to think about that, you know, to protect that investment. Yeah, how many people were a little grossed out by those pad bugs? I didn't even know that was a thing until I saw this this presentation. So definitely try to maintain and keep up with your instruments. All right, any other questions?
Ooh, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Ivan.
Where would you go, like, if you wanted to get your instrument like upgraded or whatever? Like polish or whatever. Where would you go for that?
If you want to get it cleaned,
Like my instrument, it's not like super old, but I'd like for it to, like, you know, look better. So where would I go for that?
Yeah. So what kind of instrument is it? Or just a trumpet?
Yeah.
Clarinet?
Oh, it's a trumpet. It's a trumpet. Yeah, it's a trumpet.
Trumpet. Okay, great. Is it silver?
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yes, ma'am.
Fantastic. So actually, yeah, as soon as you bring in your instrument for cleaning, we actually do a polish with the silver instruments. So once you bring that instrument in, we'll do the chem clean, and then we'll actually dip it in a silver polish bath, and we polish that up. We do the best we can. If the plating is starting to go, that's where we unfortunately won't be able to polish it up too much. But as long as the plating is still there, we usually can shine those up really, really well. So that part's actually included in with our chemical bath for our silver instruments.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
and I put the number here and the name of the service, it's Charlotte Band Instrument Service. Put that slide back up for you. She's given me permission to download this slide deck as a PDF, and I'll include that for you in Canvas. So you can go back and look at this, later on too if you get this contact information. But this is where I take my trumpet. Every year they do a chem clean and a polish for me, and it's great because just when it starts to get really kind of tarnished and gross looking, I know it needs to be cleaned on the inside too, and so I'm lazy. So when they clean out the inside, they also give me a great looking horn on the outside. So it's well worth it. All right. Any other questions? Those are good ones. All right, so just a couple reminders. I'm going to go ahead right now and release today's assignment to you. It's published. If you look in the module, actually, let me just share here with you so we can look at a couple of things. Okay, so here we are in the modules. So I've added August 31st through September 4th. This is your homework for tonight, instrument maintenance. It's just a little questionnaire reacting to what we heard today and what we saw in the presentation. So that's what you need to maintain for tonight. And then here you see the assignments for last week. Please make sure you go back, and if there's an assignment that you have to turn in that you haven't yet done, please do that. And then here on the bottom, Friday, the August 28th, the attendance. If you don't complete that, I cannot give you attendance. I can't mark you present for attendance on Friday. So you need to do that little, it's a 4-question answer survey. It's easy, it takes you just a second, but that's what we get for our attendance. And then let me show you something else I added this weekend. Up on the very top, still in modules, at the very top, I added several things. We talked about how to print to PDF from Windows last week. We talked about how to print to PDF on a Mac last week. So if some of you were having issues uploading assignments that were blank, please check out that. I got that right off of internet, how step by step. So hopefully that should work for you. And then here are the virtual backgrounds. So when you click on the virtual backgrounds, Jen Tisdale actually designed these for us. So there are 6 that you can use. You don't have to use them if you don't want to, but if you want to, you click on that, download it, and if you're able to get the virtual backgrounds to work, you're welcome to use those. You can use them for our class in band, or you can use them for any other classes if you want to. But there's an option for you if you just don't want to have the camera on with the background going, in your space at home. So there are some options that help alleviate when we have to turn on cameras and microphones for rehearsals. Maybe that'll help you out if you need those. And again, that's right here in the modules. So you notice again that I'm organizing these by week, and then we can take a look at this one. I'm going to start organizing them. I didn't last week, but I changed this over the weekend. I'm going to start organizing them also by day, so that if you miss a day, you can see that. Okay. Any questions about any of that? Okay, cool. So just be ready to roll tomorrow. Your assignment tonight is to get that homework done from the presentation today. I'll put the slide deck up later on this afternoon so you can reference that. Hopefully you will have learned a couple of things that you can fill in there instantly right now. Double check, make for sure you've got working camera and microphone, or let me know if we can take care of that. If you still need a school-owned instrument, if you haven't picked up a school-owned instrument, I'll be here tomorrow from 2:30 to 3:30 to pick you up. I had 3 sessions last week, so if you need it, I'll be here tomorrow from 2:30 to 3:30. Let me know, and I'll have an instrument ready for you. Okay, lots of information coming at you this morning. I got it, but one last chance for questions here. Kiana?
So my mom just called to get my instrument cleaned, and they said that I need to borrow an instrument. So can I borrow one for like 2 weeks?
Let me see if I have one for you. They said 2 weeks.
Yeah, like 1.5 to 2 weeks.
I think I have one for you if you want to come in tomorrow, 2:30, 3:30. I think I have one. It's definitely like a student model one that I can loan out for you. It's again a temporary fix. We spent a lot of time talking about that this morning, but I can get one of those for you tomorrow if you want.
Okay.
Okay. Who else had their hand up here? Brenna, is that you?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
2 things. 1, what instrument does she play?
Clarinet.
Okay. And then 2, not really a question, a statement. Just it's been in the back of my head now. She talked about the pad bugs, and the entire time I was just thinking about like eyebrow mites, and then everyone has them, and I can't stop thinking about that.
Well,
Everyone
hopefully
has
you're
bugs in their
hopefully
eyebrows.
you don't play your flute with your eyebrows, and so hopefully the eyebrow mites won't be an issue on your flute. But yeah, those pad bugs were pretty gross. I didn't even know those were a thing until and she had pictures of them, so I know they're real. So not made up. All right, Adrian.
If I wanted to clean my trumpet, right? How much would it be?
So it depends on what brand, but our lowest cost is it starts at $65, and that is the Kim Clean. So the whole thing is disassembled, new felts, new corks, and they'll be able to go into more detail there at the shop about what that's about. And then it goes up to for your professional model, so like your silver box strads. So any of our professional model instruments, that's going to be an $85 charge. But again, that includes the silver polishing as well as making sure we put slide oil rather than grease on your kick slides, so your first and your third valve slides.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop recording here.